Welcome back to the deep dive, where we try to cut through all the noise and get you straight to the knowledge that really matters. In today's digital world, there's this constant challenge, right? It echoes everywhere. How do you build fast, adapt quickly, bring digital ideas to life without getting totally bogged down in traditional coding? It can feel like a huge mountain to climb for lots of folks. Well, good news. Today, we're doing a deep dive into rapid product development with no code. We're going to be pulling back the curtain on some really powerful tools. Things like n8n for automation, Airtable for managing data, and Bubble for building those front-end user interfaces. Our mission, really, for you, our listener, is to give you a shortcut, a way to understand how you can actually use these tools. We want you to walk away feeling, properly well-informed about making digital products happen, hopefully with a few surprising facts and maybe a bit of humor along the way. Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. No code. What's the core idea? Well, it's basically a movement, yeah? Empowering ordinary computer users like you to build digital solutions. It does this by hiding all the complex code stuff. Think of it like building apps using really intuitive visual tools, often web-based. You're designing and creating, not wrestling with lines of code. It puts the focus on the idea first.
Yeah, and that skepticism you mentioned about no-code tools being dismissed as toys or just a fad, it's actually kind of familiar in tech history. People said similar things about early visual programming tools, maybe even JavaScript, way back when. But the landscape now, it's totally shifted. No-code tools bring immense value. They're quicker to develop with, often cheaper to own, and sometimes just more efficient, especially when the person who actually does the daily task is the one building the solution. That domain expertise is key.
Right. That's a huge shift. So it's not just building faster, it's changing who builds and how they think about business. Are we seeing totally new ways of starting companies because of this?
Oh, absolutely. We're seeing this new wave of entrepreneurs who can just bypass the old hurdles, needing lots of capital or deep technical skills. They're not just tweaking old ideas, they're kind of rewriting the startup rule book. Our sources mentioned some people launching and testing literally hundreds of business ideas in a year. They treat ventures, the source said, like cattle, which sounds a bit harsh, but the point is they nurture the winners and move on fast from the failures. Why? Because the cost of failure in time and money is so low now. That sheer volume of experimentation lets them pivot and innovate at, frankly, unbelievable speeds.
Wow. Okay. Treating companies like cattle. That's certainly a visual. But I get the point. Minimal risk allows maximum experimentation. So we've got the big picture. Let's zoom in now on one of the workhorses here, n8n. If data is the lifeblood, n8n is kind of like the nervous system, right? Connecting everything, making sure information flows properly. It's a no-code automation tool. Its main job. Connecting different systems so they can share information in a meaningful way. And it's not just about saving time on the task itself. It cuts down that context switching time, shifting mentally between different jobs. Research says that can cost you, like 20 minutes each time. Imagine automating just one of those task switches.
Exactly. And building on that, what makes n8n really potent is that it's data and system agnostic. Basically, it doesn't care what system it's talking to or what the data looks like. It can bridge totally different things. Like, the sources gave this amazing example, connecting a Linux phone system, a Raspberry Pi call recorder, and a Windows CRM running on SQL Server. Trying to do that traditionally. A nightmare of custom scripts, constant upkeep. With n8n, it becomes one smooth flow. It basically inherits the powers of whatever it connects to. Almost anything becomes possible. It's like the ultimate digital translator.
The ultimate digital duct tape.
But, the good kind that actually holds. Okay, let's talk mechanics. How does n8n actually work? Imagine you have these little specialized robots. Each does one tiny job, fetch data, send an email, whatever. In n8n, these are called nodes. You link these nodes together in a sequence telling them what order to do things in, and bang, you've built a workflow. That's your automated process. It can be super simple, just 2 nodes, or hundreds for complex stuff. Right. But how do these workflows know when to start? That's where trigger nodes come in. You might use a cron node for scheduled things, run this report every day at noon, for example. Then you have triggers specific to certain apps, like when a new email arrives in Gmail. But the really flexible one is the webhook node. Think of it like a unique web address, a sort of digital doorbell for your workflow. Any other system, anywhere online, can send a specific message, an HTTP request, to that address, and it instantly kicks off your n8n workflow. Super versatile.
Okay, so webhooks let things talk to n8n. What about n8n talking back out to other systems?
That's where the HTTP request node comes in. This node lets n8n communicate with pretty much any system that has a REST API. A REST API is basically a structured way for programs to talk to each other over the web. It's like a menu the system offers, saying here's what you can ask me for and here's how to ask. So you could use the HTTP request node to grab, say, random user data from an open API like randomuser.me. Or if you need secure access, like getting product details from upsedatabase.org, you configure the node with your credentials, maybe basic auth or an API key. n8n learns to speak that system's language.
Okay, got it. So n8n is connecting everything, translating between systems.
Yeah.
But how does the data itself get passed around? Is there like a common language?
Exactly. Just like humans need language, systems need a common format. n8n uses something called JSON. That stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's basically become the default language, the lingua franca, for moving data around on the web and between applications like this. It's a simple text format. Easy for humans to read, easy for computers to process. That's why n8n can connect such a huge variety of services. They almost all speak JSON or can be made to speak it.
Okay, JSON. Sounds important. Can you break it down a little? What does it actually look like?
Sure, think of it like a structured list or a digital filing cabinet. It uses key value pairs. So you have a label, the key like fruit, and then the data itself, the value like apple. Keys are always strings and quotes. Values can be strings, numbers, true, false, or even other nested structures. These pairs are often grouped into objects using curly brackets. An object is just a collection of key value pairs. And you can also have arrays, which use square brackets. An array is just an ordered list of values. It could be a list of numbers, strings, or even a list of objects. n8n itself organizes the data internally within this JSON structure, usually having main parts like JSON for the actual data and sometimes binary for files. It's all very neat and organized.
Right, so it's structured text, basically. It makes sense.
Yeah.
But what happens if, there isn't a perfect NN node for exactly what you need to do with that data? Are you stuck?
Good question. No, you're not stuck. That's where the function node comes in. This is like your escape hatch. It lets you write a little bit of custom JavaScript code right inside your workflow. You can manipulate the data coming in from the previous node in pretty much any way you want. All the data is usually available in an array called items. You can access specific bits using standard JavaScript ways, often dot notation, like item 0geo.json.sum field. So if you needed to, say, add a unique random ID to every piece of data passing through, you could easily do that in a function node. Maybe something like id math.flow or math.random, using n8n's expression syntax within the node. It gives you that bit of coding power when you need it without leaving the no-code flow.
Okay, so you can dip into code if absolutely necessary. That's powerful.
Yeah, and you're not just limited to the data from the node right before it. n8n has ways, like using the items method, to pull data from any node that ran earlier in the workflow. That's super useful if you need info from, say, the trigger step way back at the beginning to use in a calculation much later on. Keeps everything connected.
Makes sense. Okay, so n8n is moving and transforming data like a champ, but where does all this data, live? That brings us to databases, right? The backbone. We're hearing a lot about no-code databases like Airtable, even Google Sheets being used this way. Why are they getting so popular?
Well, a big part of it is familiarity. They often look and feel like spreadsheets, which most people understand. That makes them way less intimidating than traditional database models like SQL. It just lowers the barrier to understanding and using your data effectively. It's about accessibility again.
And the sources seemed keen on Airtable specifically.
Yeah, Airtable gets highlighted often. It's got a really strong community, a very good API, which is crucial for connecting tools like n8n, well-documented NA node already built, and loads of tutorials and learning resources. It's a solid choice. But honestly, the principles apply to any database you use, especially these online no-code ones. You need to think about best practices.
Like what? What kind of best practices?
Things like minimizing how much data you send back and forth. Bandwidth costs money and time. Maybe compressing data if possible, trying to reduce the number of times you talk to the database, API calls, or write changes to it, caching data if it doesn't change often, and the basics too. Backing up regularly, keeping a log of changes, using unique identifiers for records like a user ID, and definitely security using HTTPS, maybe limiting access by IP address if the service allows it. These things make your no-code app robust and reliable.
Right. It doesn't matter how easy it is to build if it falls over or leaks data. And n8n plays nice with these databases, like Airtable.
Oh yeah, very nicely. Performing CRUDA operations, that's create, read, update, delete, is usually straightforward with the dedicated Airtable node in n8n. You just tell it which basin table to use, and then you map the data. You can say, take the first name from my incoming data and put it in the first name column in Airtable. And that set node we mentioned earlier, it's often useful right before the database node just to rearrange or structure the incoming data so it perfectly matches the columns you have in Airtable. Makes the right operation clean and simple.
Okay, cool. So we've got the backend logic humming with n8n, data stored nicely in Airtable. But people need to interact with this, right? They need buttons and forms and stuff, the front end.
Exactly. And that's where a tool like Bubble often comes into the picture. Think of Bubble as a great partner for n8n when you need a user interface. While n8n is killer at back-end logic and automation, Bubble gives you this powerful visual environment specifically for building web applications, the part the user actually sees and clicks on. It's where your product gets its face.
How do n8n and Bubble talk to each other then?
Through Bubble's API endpoints. These are like those digital doorways again, specifically set up by Bubble. They let external tools, like n8n, interact with Bubble's data and its workflows. Bubble gives you pretty fine-grained control in its API settings. You can enable or disable access to different parts, like the data API or the workflow API. And critically, you secure it all with API tokens. n8n would send this token in the request header, like authorization. Bear API key, proving it has permission to talk to Bubble. Security is built in.
Okay, so secure connection. What about the data inside Bubble? How's that structured? Is it like Airtable?
It's similar in concept. Bubble uses data types, which are kind of like JSON objects or tables in a database. Each data type has fields, which are the properties like a user data type might have fields for email and name. And importantly, Bubble has privacy settings for these data types and fields. You can set rules about who can see or modify what. You can make things public or keep them private, requiring that API key we just talked about for access. Bubble also has its own internal workflow engine separate from n8n. These can run on the front end in the user's browser or back end on Bubble servers. And these workflows can accept parameters data passed into them when they're triggered. Like a send email workflow might need parameters for to, subject, and body.
Ah, okay, so n8n can trigger those Bubble workflows too, and pass data.
Yep, that's a common pattern. n8n's HTTP request node can talk to Bubble's data API to do CRUD operations directly on Bubble's internal database if needed. Or it can hit Bubble's workflow API. This lets n8n trigger one of those back-end Bubble workflows and send data along as parameters. So you could have n8n do some complex external fetching or processing, then tell Bubble, okay, run your update user profile workflow with this new info. They complement each other really well.
That makes sense. So you're building this interface in Bubble. What's key to making it actually, good for users?
Well, one absolute critical thing nowadays is responsive design, making sure your app looks and works great on any screen size, desktops, tablets, phones.
Yeah, that seems huge now. I saw a stat somewhere, like 10 years ago, almost everyone accessed the internet on a desktop.
Right. The source mentioned over 93% desktop access a decade ago. Now, it's plummeted to around 44%. Mobile is dominant. If your web app isn't responsive, if it looks broken or is hard to use on a phone, you're basically shutting out potentially more than half your audience and just frustrating people. It's not optional anymore.
So how does Bubble help with that? Is it difficult to make things responsive?
Actually, Bubble has pretty great built-in tools for responsiveness. You have control over things like minimum and maximum widths for elements, how margins behave, alignment. You can even set rules to hide certain elements completely on smaller screens if they're not essential, to keep things clean, or control how text and images scale. And one of its best features is the responsive viewer. Right inside the editor, you can instantly see how your page will look on different device sizes. It's like a design superpower, takes out all the guesswork.
Okay, responsive design is key. What else makes the Bubble side work smoothly? You mentioned workflows. What starts them?
Events. Just like n8n has triggers, Bubble workflows are kicked off by events. You can group them roughly. There are general events like user is logged in, page is loaded, or even due every X seconds. Then element events, which are tied to UI elements, things like button is clicked, input's value is changed, direct user interaction. And then there are trigger events in the back end, which are a bit special. They can react to changes in the database itself, and they often run with higher privileges, able to access data maybe the user themselves couldn't.
Got it. Events trigger workflows. Makes sense.
And just quickly, beyond the visual design and events, you also need to think about the basics for a good user experience. Things like data validation, using the right field types in Bubble, text, number, date, maybe creating custom types to guide users into entering data correctly, and definitely planning for error handling, what happens when something goes wrong. You need good logging to figure out what went wrong and maybe clear messages for the user. A smooth experience includes handling the bumps gracefully.
Right, absolutely. Okay, this is all great in theory. Can we maybe look at a couple of concrete examples? How does this actually look when you put n8n and maybe these other tools together?
Sure. The sources gave a couple of really neat ones.
Sure.
First, think about a Telegram bot. You could build a bot using n8n. A user messages the bot on Telegram, say Pokemon Ditto. n8n gets that message via its Telegram trigger node, uses the HTTP request node to call an external API, for example, use Pokemon API, the Pokemon API, to get info about Ditto. Then, n8n formats that information nicely, abilities, moves, type, and sends it back as a message to the user in Telegram. All automated, no coding needed, just configuring n8n nodes. A custom Pokemon Encyclopedia bot.
Okay, a Pokemon bot. I love it. That really shows the connecting power. What else?
Another cool was a metrics dashboard. Imagine you want a simple web page showing key stats for your project. Maybe GitHub stars and forks, Docker Hub pulls for your image, stuff like that. You can actually have n8n serve that web page directly, using a webhook node set to respond to requests. The n8n workflow triggers, uses HTTP request nodes to fetch the latest stats from GitHub, Docker Hub, wherever. Then it formats that data into simple HTML and sends that HTML back as the response to the webhook request. So anyone visiting that webhook URL sees a constantly updated dashboard powered entirely by an n8n workflow. n8n acts as the data collector, the formatter, and the web server. Pretty neat.
That is neat. So n8n isn't just connecting things behind the scenes. It can actually create user-facing things like web pages itself sometimes.
In simpler cases, yeah. These examples really show that core idea. See a problem or an opportunity, and then super quickly build a prototype or even a full solution using these tools. You can test ideas, validate them, get something working with minimal upfront investment of time or traditional development resources. It just speeds everything up.
Fantastic. Well, that brings us pretty much to the end of our deep dive today on rapid product development with no code. We've seen how n8n can be your automation powerhouse, how tools like Airtable make data easy, and how Bubble lets you build the front-end experience. Together, these tools really do let you break past those old coding barriers. They empower pretty much anyone to become a builder, a creator in the digital space. It feels like the whole landscape of making things has genuinely shifted. The power is in more hands now. So to leave you with something to think about, what problem, maybe one that seemed too complex before, could you solve now? What idea, maybe one you thought was impossible without a huge team or budget, could you actually bring to life? Now that you know about this shortcut, this different way of building, what are you going to create? We challenge you to think big, but start small. Just start building.